I think any wellness program needs a wellness strategy, and our wellness strategy, especially for this month for the reproductive system, the first part of it is to stop poisoning the reproductive system. So let's go a little bit more, and I talked a little bit about that, but let's go a little bit more into that today. Hi, I'm Dr. Peter Minke. This is Minke Wellness, and as we look at the reproductive system, there's plenty of opportunity to talk about how to clean things up. And so let me just go through a few topics here associated with the reproductive system. The main thing is, well, actually, believe it or not, the main thing is, I believe, probably emotional toxicity. The emotional toxicity associated with the reproductive system and fertility and sex and sexuality. We're really kind of, I don't know about you, but it seems like we're kind of messed up in that area. We don't have a very healthy focus on that. And I think that kids need to be taught a biological basis for sexuality, and I think that's where we get some of this confusion that's coming out, where people are starting to misunderstand their own feelings and how they feel about another person. They feel a certain closeness with someone, and all of a sudden they think it's sexual. And what it really is that they have a very strong connection, a strong bond to someone, and that doesn't necessarily mean there's a sexual component. And you go back to the Catholic teaching on the different kinds of love, 3 different kinds of love, and there's Latin words for those. I'm not going to think of them right in a moment, but there's love of God, love of self, and there's love of God, the highest form of love, that kind of spiritual love. Then there's love of just brotherly love, the kind of love that we experience with each other, and that can be a very, very powerful love. And then we have the sexual love, which is very attractive, that kind of thing. But what I'm saying is, if we don't have an understanding of some of this basic context of where our emotions and where our sexuality fall in, we can end up being confused that we're attracted to someone when, in a sexual way. We think it's sexual when it actually is simply a very powerful brotherly love context, or someone who is very spiritual. We get very attracted to them, and we think that, I must be sexually attracted to that person because they're very spiritual and I'm really attracted to them, and we misunderstand that. So we need to understand the way our sexuality works, and in the context of our emotions, right? So these emotional confusion can be very difficult to navigate if we don't have a really good grounded sense of what part of this is what we call chastity, proper integration of our sexuality, okay? And so this emotional toxicity that we need to get rid of has to do with our not very good formation, if you want to think of it from that side. We don't want to get very well formed in our sexuality, and I think we can change that very, very simply, okay? And part of that is, well, one is to get rid of these emotional toxicity issues, right? So once we kind of clear the air, we can get there. And part of that is first and foremost, we got to get rid of pornography. Guys, you got to get rid of that. Now, obviously we're visually assaulted all over the place, but it's one of those things that you can't dwell on it, right? So if you get a magazine rack, or you got people that are clothed, women that are not clothed very well in terms of being very, very illicit about their sexual bodies, and showing us all that. And actually, my son asked me one time, what's the difference between modesty and pornography? Art and pornography. What's the difference between art and pornography? Because he's looking in a book and he sees, this nude Venus de Milo, and she's naked, right? And I was like, okay, well, the real big difference there between art and pornography is if the intention of the artist and the model is to elicit a sexual response, and they're all, designed to be sexual, then that's probably pornography. If they're there to highlight the beauty of the human form, just there, and the human form is of course being revealed, that's perfectly fine. That's art, and I think you can tell the difference when you really look at the what we consider to be the old art. Old artwork was not necessarily, it doesn't really generate the same kind of thing. Okay, so my point here is, we got to get rid of pornography. We got to have a much more balanced sense of what is true and honest, and the part about porn, and that pornography exists for women too. I think that's in the form of the romance novels and things like that, because women are emotionally stimulated. So when you create a fantasy context in which the man is exceedingly romantic, and all the context in which that exists, that doesn't happen in your life. It doesn't happen in the real world. And so just like a man who's looking at this perfect woman who's been surgically altered or whatever, or she's you know, whatever it is, she's revealing all of her parts. Basically, what you're getting in the romance novel is the same kind of thing emotionally. You've got this, you know, this guy that's revealing all his parts, but it's done in a way that is attractive to women. And so those are just as bad for your emotional stability and sexual intimacy with your partner as the male version of pornography. So guys, folks, you got to get rid of these things and go back to reality and appreciate your spouse and your partner for who they are. And really look every day at the good things that you have in your partner, and how the interest, the sexual bond that you have is associated with the time that you have, your life that you have together, and it's not this purely you know, hey, I want this, you know, 19-year-old stud or doll or whoever, whatever derogatory, effectively derogatory term you want to apply, because we're objectifying a person. Okay, so emotional poisons, pornography is a big one in the sexual area, and we've also got our own histories. Okay, the abuse, any kind of abuse that we've had to the sexual organs or involving the sexual organs, whether it was a physical abuse, emotional abuse, you know, teasing, hazing, or all the way full on into abuse, rape, you know, and that kind of thing. Then, you know, all those layers, the different, obviously different severities, but they all produce a certain issue, difficulty in terms of being connected and feeling like sex and sexuality is a safe and good thing, and a good and integrated thing into our life. So we're going to work tomorrow with essential oils that can help with processing those emotions, and we'll do some breathing with that and be. So right now, I encourage you to kind of breathe in and be whole, and just when you breathe in and connect to your whole body, which we've been doing breathing all this year, make that connection to your genital area, bring the light and love into that. And so we're going to continue working with that tomorrow. Okay, let's talk about some of the physical toxicity issues that are associated. We've talked a little bit about this already, but hormone disruptors is a big factor, and much of this is in the area of fragrances and plasticizers. So when you get plastic toys that are rubberized, they bend, they have phthalates in them. These phthalates are extremely damaging to the hormone system. They're very hormone disrupting chemicals. They can be disruptive in very small quantities, and they're present in a lot of fragrance devices, right? So when you have these plug-ins, or you have these fabric softeners and all this other stuff, they can very easily hide phthalates. They don't even have to label them, and that's a big problem. I think we need to really fix that problem. Is we need to be accurate in our labeling. If something says an essential oil, it should be coming from the plant. And if it has chemical additives in it, those additives should all be labeled. I don't care whether they're cosmetic or not. And that's the problem, is we have cosmetic labeling laws that differ from supplement labeling laws. Supplement labeling laws require all those compounds to be listed, but the cosmetic labeling laws do not. And we're just somehow ignoring the fact that these things absorb through the skin. And as I mentioned before in a video, that the absorption through the skin is 300 times higher, more efficient at the genital area. So if you're putting on stuff on your clothes, then you're getting that stuff wicked right into the reproductive system. They cannot possibly be healthy. So we've got these toxins that are coming in the form of hormone disruptors. Now, you might have heard on the internet that some things like lavender oil and tea tree oil are bad for little boys. It'll disrupt little boy development, and it's absolutely false. The true lavender oil and true tea tree oil will not do that. People have been using these for thousands of years with never any documentation or record or in the literature, in the herbal context. People who understood these things, very sophisticated herbalists, have been using these for many years, have never any kind of context of that. This was one doctor who had one case study. And I don't doubt that it got isolated down to the fragrance part of the shampoo that was being used, or lotion, or so. There was some kind of shampoo, I think it was, that the lotion was being used, and it had fragrance in it, and then both of these created, you know, sort of a feminization of the little boy, and had some nipple issues, breast development or whatever. And I'm like going, no way. I mean, one case study doesn't make an entire thing. Well, there's no, to me, that it's clear that these fragrance molecules, these essential oils, were tainted with phthalates. That would be all it would take. So that study has been debunked. But the problem is this particular study has been taught in CE credit classes for 2 doctors all over the country, as if it was the best study ever, and it's just total garbage, okay? And so you're gonna have to combat that, and in your mind you have to realize that you go back and look at your own evidence. You're not, but anyway, if you want an expert advice, and I consider myself expert advice as a PhD cell biologist and a natural medicine person for 20 years, I'm telling you that study is garbage, and there's no basis for worrying about it. In fact, I found actual legitimate research that showed lavender oil protected male fertility. So throw that one out. No worries there. I've been using tea tree and lavender on my family and my kids. I've got 4 boys. There's no problem with feminization in that case. Okay, so birth control pills, hygiene products I already talked about. Obviously, we want clean hygiene product, but let's talk about birth control pills for just a little bit. There's nothing more assaulting than the birth control pills, and I want to be clear that some of these birth control pills, even the pills, are abortifacient. In other words, they do not prevent fertility. They do not prevent the fertilization. So you have a little baby formed, and then that ends up being killed, or because it cannot implant. And if, depending on what your belief system is, I mean, as a Catholic, I believe that that the moment of conception is the beginning of a human life. So we have a human life there that's being killed by a chemical situation, and to me, that's not acceptable. So you're gonna, I mean, truth is truth, but we all have to come to it in our way. So I'm not telling you what you're going to do. I do think you need to, if you have a belief that humanity, that your life started at conception when the egg and the sperm got together, if your life started at conception, then that was when you started and you were alive, then you need to be looking at some of these methods of birth control pill that are abortifacient. They are not preventing the fertility event. I'm not saying that a birth control pill system that prevents fertility, that prevents the fertilization event is all that good either. It's certainly very damaging to the body. We already know that. Documents are really clear that birth control pills would cause cancer and blood clots and all kinds of problems. So we definitely want to get rid of those. And the question is it worth it? What's the threat? If the threat of, oh my gosh, I might get pregnant. Well, okay, if you're having sex outside of marriage, then that poses a problem, doesn't it? Well, again, right sexuality, right relationships this is emotional toxicity, people. The idea, the concept that birth control pills are liberating our sexuality. No, it's putting it in bondage. It's splitting our sexuality, and it's creating problems, okay? It allows us to have sex without the consequence. Well, the consequence is a good consequence. It's fertility, right? So in the context of marriage, we don't use the birth control system. There's very accurate charting methods for keeping track of your fertility, and if you're fertile, don't have sex, and that's what we do to avoid pregnancy when we don't feel like we want to add another child to our life. Situation is either by Amy's physical abilities. I mean, there's a lot of factors to consider, if you carefully consider, in the context of fertility and having another child. Now, we get that. We understand that. So the question is, are we going to be truthful about the whole thing instead of just kind of making us up this little fake version of a life? And like I said, most cultures celebrate fertility, and all of a sudden we're hostile toward that. So this old idea of stop poisoning ourselves in the reproductive system, in the reproductive category, heavily includes attitude about all this. And I think this is a very, very important thing to consider as we start looking at having healthy reproductive system, healthy fertility. Now, some of you could say, well, I don't know why I'm listening to all this. This whole thing has been, 13 minutes of wasted time so far because I am past that time. Well, if you're past that time, then you're in the area of wisdom. And if you don't have wisdom in this area, how can you teach that? How can you pass that on? If you've made mistakes in your past, then you need to look at those mistakes and say, okay, look, I didn't do so well in this area. I need to learn and guide and help and help the next generation have a better attitude about sex and sexuality. You now have a wisdom vantage point. You can say, this didn't work. These things did not work so well for me. This was not a good thing, and so you make sure you pass down some wisdom. And so many older people right now, they don't feel like they have any voice on the issue of sexuality and sex and sexuality and reproduction and all that. We just stay silent. No, I'm going to stay out of it. My kids are going to do what they're going to do. Well, that's not getting them any good. We're not learning. Okay, so I encourage you to be strong, prayerfully consider really getting involved in this issue of human sexuality and getting on top of all that. Okay, so Just some few comments. Maybe it's hard for some of you to hear this. Wellness may be just hard to hear, but it's important, and we need to move forward on all this. So we'll talk more about tomorrow with the emotional oils, trying to work on that emotional issue associated with fertility. Join us tomorrow. Wellness one day at a time.